taking stock of what went right and what went wrong just 2 months into the season. We'll do that tonight, evaluate the strategies, and amend them going forward. We'll also have our regular waiver wire, pitcher preview, and injury updates for you. Stick around, because Beat the Shift is next. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and once again, Ruvain Guy. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Still a little bit hoarse. I tell you this pitching and this softball and the coaching and little league that just, I don't know, takes a toll. Just a lot. I pitched 4 games in the span of 3 days this weekend. Big, long Memorial Day weekend. Got a couple of wins out of it, but pretty tiring. Otherwise, how are you?
Well, I'm not as tired as you are. I only play second base when I play softball, so not that bad. And I am the coach of my son's team also, so I do get some yelling in also. I really feel bad for the umpires, though.
Yeah, our last game that we had for my kid, championship game 1, they won something like 18-2. They absolutely dismantled the other team. My son is one of the pitchers that pitches, and he'll be going in game 2 this weekend. So we want to welcome a guest, been on our show before, from Fantasy Endgame on YouTube, Pierre Camus. How are you, Pierre?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good, and welcome to June. We are in month number 3 of the baseball season. I can't believe it. It's going by so far, and, after 2 months, I think it's appropriate to take stock of where we are, to take stock of some wins and losses. And so we're going to do that on this show today. And we jump right into it. And, first of all, Pierre, I know my date. My date is always June 5th. My dad's birthday is June 5th. And that's the day that I think that the standings really converge and have a very good representation of what the final standings could be. Obviously, things can happen in the final 4 months, but the correlation between now and the end of the season has an R-squared of, I think, north of 50%. So we are correlated, and it is converging. So when do you take stock of when the standings become real?
Well, funny enough, I feel like next week kicks it off for me, partly because, as you know, I'm an educator and it's my summer vacation and I'm ready to dive, 100% into baseball for the next couple of months. I get to really sit and actually watch some games and pick apart the data. So that aside, I do, completely agree with you. As you know, I look at your ATC projections before. I put a lot of weight into that because I know how they're formulated. Having worked together and reading all your amazing articles, I know, kind of the data behind it. I'm not a data guy in the sense that I can't run those numbers and crunch them myself, but I can extrapolate some meaning from them. So I do know that there's a lot of significant statistical thresholds that, they just take time, right? You can't take a lot out of certain stats until we have enough at-bats, until we have enough innings pitched, batters faced. A lot of it's just noise from a short sample size. So now that we're at, I guess about around this point in the season, and different stats, of course, have different thresholds. But now I feel like we can make something of what this season is telling us, not just what does this guy do for a first couple of weeks or so. And also, I feel like we've just gotten through the mad rush of all these early season prospect call-ups, right? All these guys, okay, who's for real, who's not, who's going to stick. And now we're kind of seeing these lineups kind of get settled. And so I do agree. I think this is kind of a good time to take stock of where's my team at.
So, Ruvain, in addition to that, what are you trying to do now in terms of adjusting strategies? What are you looking at in your league components to see what you need to change at this point?
Well, first of all, I look at where I am in the standings, see if I even have a chance, whether I need to make wholesale changes or just minuscule changes to get me over the hump, to get me into the money. And you look at the categories. I think the best categories to look at are the categories, first of all, to start with, are the ones that you're ahead in. Those categories, you have to make sure that you keep that lead so you don't lose those points that you already have. So take stock. Do I need another guy on the waiver wire to fill in for a guy who's injured because I'm going to lose stolen bases because let's say I have Cedric Mullins in a bunch of leagues or something like that? Then you look at the categories that you're very far behind in. In those categories are very far behind in, it's already 2 months. It's pretty hard to make up a lot of space, especially in counting categories when you're substantially far away. If you need to get, let's say, 10 stolen bases to gain 2 points, stolen bases may not be the category for you to go for. But then you look at the third category, and those are the categories that are still bunched together because the categories for the first couple of months, especially for most teams in the leagues that I'm in, they're always bunched together, and there's a lot of movement in the standings for the first couple of months. At this point, there isn't that much movement. So you're able to see where you can gain points and where you can lose points. And that's what I think the idea of what you got to do. You got to find the areas where you can gain points by not making that many moves.
Yeah, and I'll add to it that, obviously the specific categories matter and you need to be taking a deep dive at this point if you haven't already. But I think that the overall level of risk you need to take has to adjust now. So if you are playing from behind, right, you can't just get the standard expected value of stats. You need something more. You need upside, right? And if you're playing from ahead, if you're on top, I think you need the base of production. Not that you don't need upside of players, but you need to bank a certain amount each week to roll with it. Just to compare, a little bit of analogy as to, I'm playing softball last night. We're winning 5-1 going to the final inning. And, sometimes in the outfield we play 4 players across. In softball we have 10 players, 10 fielders that is. Sometimes you play 3 in a short center. But what we did was we played 5 infielders, essentially. And we're basically saying, all right, if the first batter gets on, it really doesn't matter if it's a single, double, or triple, right? He gets on. Obviously, you want a single instead of a double. You want a force play at second to set you up. But, we're just looking to get outs here. So when you have batters and there's, most of the night they're just grounding out. I get a lot of balls on the ground. Let's just play 5 infielders, have a higher percentage chance to get an out. We might give up a double in the outfield. Like if it's hit into the outfield, instead of a single, it can turn into a double. But we don't care, right? Because we're playing from ahead. So what I'm saying is, knowing from the fact that we were ahead, we went for a different approach of 5 infielders to make it safer. And I think the same thing is true about your fantasy team. And now is a good time to take stock of what to do. Like if you're trading, I would want to trade for more upside. Get a player who maybe is underperforming, who, before the season was rated highly. Try it. You never know. You need to get something more. You can't just play from ahead and bank stats. You need to bank on all the upside, take on risk. And so now is the time to decide what to do. Agree, Pierre?
Absolutely agree. Talking about risk does definitely make sense here. But like one thing that I try to do, and I know we'll get into as far as what's worked and what hasn't worked so far this season, I think try to really capture, because we see it's a long season, right? Like it's a marathon, not a sprint. We look at this, baseball is a long season, but really when you think about it, it's a series of I guess you can think of it, like we play divided by weeks, but it's like a bunch of mini seasons all together, because we have a lot of guys who are hot one month and they're cold the next, ups and downs and the highs and lows. You have to really try to take advantage of it and see it before it comes, which easier said than done, right? But it's whatever that final stat line is for any of these guys at the end of the season, I guarantee they weren't performing at that level the entire season. At some point, you have a pitcher whose ERA is under 2. He's looking like he's going to be an all-star, breakout, and then a couple of bad outings, and all of a sudden, it doubles. And so you really have to try to kind of zoom in on a little more micro level and see what's going on and take a snapshot of this particular moment. How can you take advantage of that in the trade market, on the waiver wire, etc.?
So, I want to talk a little bit about some of the wins and losses that we've had this year. And what I mean by that is not just victory laps. See, I told you about this guy. I was on him. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in more of the strategy or what you had prepared before the season, what you went with, and what has worked and what hasn't. We could talk about specific players. Obviously, that's included. But just open it up to you, and maybe we'll go around the room and talk about it because I think it's applicable as we want to change strategies for this year. It's also applicable for next year. You're going to forget early on in the season what what went right and what went wrong in May, right? Talking with Jeff Zimmerman, he always talks about taking a log, like write down every week or every month, hey, what waiver wire pickup went well? What did I do that I didn't like? And you could read it at the end of the season or in the off season. So I think it's good to take stock right now of what did work and what didn't work. I think 2 months is a good sample. So starting with you, Pierre, what is something, a player or a strategy that you had going to the season that worked and we'll call it a win for you so far?
All right, so this will come out sounding kind of like a brag, but I guarantee you'll hear how it turned from a win into a loss. Okay, so one thing I know I did particularly well during draft season and to start the season was identifying those guys who did get off to hot starts and kind of those, sleepers, guys who just needed opportunity. And I kind of foresaw that they would have the chance or the path was there to have that everyday job and that they would actually turn that into production. So I'm talking about guys like James Outman, Bryson Stott, who was red hot to start the year, like Jonah Heim, especially in a two catcher league. So these are all guys I have on my TGFBI team. Of course, you're familiar with that, the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational. So this is why up until last week, I was in first place in my TGFBI league over the first 2 months because I had these guys who were red hot. I had them, and this is a 15-team league. This is a league just with analysts and experts. It's hard to get that third, fourth, fifth outfielder to be a stud. So I had a lot of these guys on the same team, and then even on the waiver wire, I think I did pretty well the first couple weeks. I got like Jaron Duran, and he was hot for a while. Guys like that. And now, well, James Outman is not the same James Outman anymore. Bryson Stott has come back to earth a little bit. Duran looks like he might be droppable. And so now, just in the past week, I've gone from first place to fourth place. And I'm pretty much struggling here because I got outbid on some of my waiver wire, pickups. So with a couple of injuries in the mix now, I'm just struggling to fill roster spots. So what was good is that I got these guys who were hot earlier in the season. You can't trade in that league, so I can't say that that's a fail. Like I didn't take advantage of the sell high window, but man, I couldn't make up for it on the waiver wire because it's just so hard to find value in the waiver wire in that league.
Do you have a lesson to be learned from that? Because obviously you were right for the first month, and it was like a partial win because it failed in the second month.
Yeah, I think maybe don't be too conservative with your fab early in the season. And, I try not to spend up too much, especially the first month. And I don't regret that. But these last couple of weeks, getting some guys that are proving to be pretty valuable or at least are giving production as opposed to some guys I have in lineups now who aren't giving production. Don't be afraid to make those kind of moves now that we're approaching June.
And before we ask Ruvain, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
Well, I'm going to base this trivia on my win for this season so far, what I'll call a win so far, and it has to do with starting pitching. Earlier in the year, we were discussing, and during draft season, we were discussing about not really paying for the top starting pitcher, we're not going over a certain amount of draft capital to get a starting pitcher. So I went back and looked at the top 25 ADP of starting pitchers from this year during draft season, and I took the top pitchers going all the way up to pick 100 overall. So there are 25 ADP top pitchers in the top 100 picks. Of those, 9 of them are currently in the top 100 in a player value for 5x5. I wanted to go back and forth, and let's see if both of you can name the 9 pitchers that were in the top 25 ADP for starting pitchers this year and are still in the top 100 player value in a 5x5.
Wow. All right. Put it to the test. I'll go with I'll go with Otani.
Otani's there, 100%. Yes, that's one of them.
I'll go with Garrett Cole.
Garrett Cole, yes, that's correct. Next.
Strider. Spencer Strider's got to be there.
Spencer Strider's there, correct.
Zach Gallen.
Zach Gallen is there. He was actually the 25th or the 23rd ranked SP in draft season.
Kevin Gausman, he must have been top 100.
Kevin Gausman's on the list also. Very good. So far, no strikes against either of you. Ariel?
Shane McClanahan.
Shane McClanahan's there. You're knocking them out. Okay. You got a total of 3 more.
I'm going to go Shane Bieber.
No, he is not in the top 100 in 5x5 right now.
Framber Valdez.
Framber Valdez is another one. Yes, there are 2 left.
Now it's getting harder.
Now it's going to be harder. Yes, there are 2 left.
Well, I know Cine Alcantara is not up there. Let's go with Luis Castillo.
Luis Castillo is there. Wow, you guys are knocking this out of the park. Maybe this trivia question is too easy.
I was about to say that. I'll go with Zach Wheeler.
Zach Wheeler is not there. That's
No.
strike 1. There's only 1 pitcher left on this list.
Top 100 ADP.
And currently in the top 100 value-wise in 5x5.
Not any of the Mets.
No.
Can I guess Logan Webb?
Logan Webb is not on the list. That's strike 2.
Did we say Garrett Cole already?
You said Garrett Cole. Pierre, you still have all 3 of your strikes. So
Is the Logan Webb not there because of ADP or because
that's
of value?
correct. He wasn't in the top 100 ADP to
Okay.
begin with.
Okay.
You just missed it. I'll give you guys a hint. American League West.
Christian Javier.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
there we go.
correct. So of those that's 9 out of the top 25 or 26 pitchers who were in the overall top 100 ADP are currently returning that value, which means that there are 15 or 16 of them, which include Corbin Burns, the aforementioned Alcantara, DeGrom, Nola, Woodruff, Verlander, Scherzer, Cease, Bieber, Wheeler, Urias, Rodon, Manoah, Fried, Darvish, Musgrove. All those other pitchers were in the top 100 and have not returned the value. So the big win that I'm talking about is not spending so much on starting pitching and going for the mid-level values instead of the top guys, because it's 1 out of 2 chance that these guys are going to hit. And not only that, of these top guys, 6 of them are not on the list because of injury. So some of these guys you didn't even have a chance because they haven't played enough. And if you fall behind in a lot of these categories, let's say you picked up Verlander and Scherzer because you wanted a lot of strikeouts, you just haven't gotten enough pitching out of them to get the strikeouts from them. So you're falling behind in counting categories, and it's very hard to make those stats up. So the big win I'm going to say is that not spending so much on starting pitching during draft season because the value just wasn't there.
Well, I mean, you're still getting value at a pretty decent percentage of the top, but as compared to the hitters in the top in terms of similar value, that's true. I mean, the hitters
exactly.
are,
You're not getting the top 100 value that you should be getting out of that spot, whether you pick them there or whether you spend the money on them.
Yeah, you do need to get aggregate value though of pitching. I think the aggregate value of pitching that you needed was higher, but you didn't necessarily need to get an ace. You could have, gotten some volume by going a little bit lower, I guess.
That's exactly right. That's why if you don't spend that top money, you can spend that money on hitting, and you can be doing well in the hitting spots, and you can always patch up the pitching, which is what I've done in a lot of my leagues. I drafted like 3 or 4 relievers, which I never usually do, not non-closer relievers, but just high-quality relievers to have in my team in case I didn't love a start or in case one of my starters got hurt. I just plugged them in, and they helped my ERA and WHIP.
Yeah. So I'll throw a couple of things out in terms of wins. Some players, some not. Freddie Freeman. I know it sounds pretty obvious. Obviously we know Freddie Freeman is good, but if you remember, I mentioned quite a bit in the offseason, even from the first offseason podcast when we were down in Arizona, that there is a case to be made that Freddie Freeman should be a top 5 pick. Right? I mean, there's nobody that is as low a risk, injury aside, because anybody can succumb to the injury. And Freeman is not an overly injured person. But in terms of returning that first-round value, Freddie Freeman is just so low risk. And as it goes, it's not about winning your draft in the first round. It's about losing it. And when you're picking Freddie Freeman, you're getting your value. He's currently the number 2 player on the player rater. He's almost a $45 player. The only one higher is Ronald Acuna, who is killing it. He's about a $50 player. I mean, look at Freeman's May. 6 homers, 4 stolen bases, 26 RBI, 28 runs, 4 stolen bases. Freeman is batting .400 in the month of May. Where is the risk for him? There isn't. Categorically, he's spread out. He's got a high floor, and he's got high upside. I mean, we've seen him be an MVP before. And I know that we said that Trey Turner had been returning value, but Trey Turner is not categorically spread just as well as Freeman, right? He's got the stolen base component. But the risk levels were so low, and I was saying, listen, if you've got an 11th pick, 12th pick, 10th pick, whatever, just pick Freddie Freeman. Don't think about it. You're going to bank that much stats. I don't care that he's a first baseman. You're banking the stats, and you're getting every single category. So I think that strategy of going for that very low risk in the first round paid off. Thoughts?
Yeah. How about Freddie Freeman? Not just the power, but more stolen bases than Trey Turner or Kyle Tucker, for that matter. I mean, I don't know if we could have predicted that, but yeah, Trey Turner was probably unanimous number 1 or 2 pick in every draft. So, but it's funny because people say, well, what's the downside there? But there is when a guy depends on his speed a little bit more, a guy switching teams, going, with a big contract. I mean, there's some variables at play there.
Yeah. If your team, if you're picking Trey Turner and Trey Turner doesn't have a good season, then you have an outsized loss in stolen bases, only because you were relying on that as part of your equation. With Freddie Freeman, there really isn't any one category. Maybe batting average, because you're expecting 300 batting average. But otherwise, you're not expecting a whopping contribution in stolen bases. You're actually not expecting a whopping contribution in homers, right? You're just getting a lot of production spread around. It doesn't hurt you as categorically as the replacement of Trey Turner. So it's very, very, very important there.
And a lot of people were low on him preseason because Trey Turner left. They said the lineup is not as good, and I think he may have even had a minor injury during spring training. So people were pretty low on him at the time also.
Any other wins that you had, Pierre?
No, I think, and you mentioned kind of related to that, people putting a lot of emphasis into a player like Turner because it's going to help me with steals. Steals are such a rare commodity. Of course, not as much this year, but I think finally moving toward the mindset of winning categories with players that can help you do that, such as moving guys like Pete Alonso into like first round ADP because he can help you almost single-handedly win home runs. And you see what he's doing so far. Aaron Judge is the obvious case there, but guys that we might push down lower, well, he's not going to get you any steals. His batting average won't be elite, but you can be happy with your home run total and then worry about the other stats later, you know what I mean? And kind of prioritizing guys who have that potential to carry your team. So I think, I guess I call it a win. I don't have as much Alonso as I'd like. And I also try to avoid guys who are just kind of good at several categories, but not necessarily going to have as much upside in others. That aside, no, I mean, I'm waiting to see if some of the players that I identified as potential wins pan out. I'm not going to take any victory laps just yet.
So I'll throw out this, and we always talk about before the preseason that if ATC says that a player is a big bargain, there is a very high probability that he will be a bargain, right? The top 3 players in terms of projected dollar value to ADP dollars. Yandy Diaz, Josh Naylor, Luis Arias. All were projected to be about an $8 bargain in a 15-team league. Look at the value that they've returned. Diaz has returned $26 so far. That's on a $1 bid. Josh Naylor, also another $1, $14. Luis Arias has returned $11. You can get him for 2 or 3 at the end of drafts because people say, oh, he's just a batting average guy. But when the value of ATC says, oh, my goodness, you're getting an $8 bargain, there you go. It just shows you that projections can be relied upon, especially when you have an aggregator like ATC say, listen, all the projections are saying this guy is an $8 bargain. the market is clearly wrong. Like when you have such an indicator, it's right. Now it's not right every single time. There's going to be injuries too, but instead of being right 60% of the time, it might be right 80% of the time. Like it's a great indicator, and it's just proof, and so that's another win this year. Ruvain, anything to add?
Yeah, I also preached preseason not to chase stolen bases. And I said you can always get them at the bottom. There's no reason why you can't get them at the bottom. You don't have to pay so much up top. And if you look at the leaders of stolen bases right now, Esteury Ruiz wasn't really that ranked that high, and he's leading the majors in stolen bases. Taylor Walls, you could have got him off for the waiver wire. He has 15 stolen bases. Ji-Hwan Bae has 15 stolen bases. Jorge Mateo was like the 25th shortstop taken. He has stolen bases. Whit Merrifield, he's having a bounce back stolen base season, even at age 34, I believe. He's having a bounce back year for stolen bases. So all these guys lower down, you didn't really have to pay. Yes, you could have gotten the Bobby Witt early on. He does have 17 stolen bases, yes, and he is playing pretty well. Corbin Carroll also, he's got a bunch of stolen bases, but it just shows that you didn't have to necessarily pay up for stolen bases in the first 2 rounds. You could have waited until mid-teens or even in the mid-20s to get a stolen base guy.
Excellent point. I'll also throw in personally, I talked about George Kirby before the season, and I said, listen, when you got a guy with such a low walk rate, and it looks real, this is such a high floor because that whip is going to stay low. And take a look. He has only thrown 6 walks this year in 71 innings. That's incredible. Last year's walk rate was 4%, which was absolutely phenomenal. His walk rate this year, 2%. 1 in 50. He's walking 1 in 50 batters. That is incredible control. He's currently a top 20 starting pitcher. That is somebody who that floor plays out, and so that's another win that I had in terms of the profile. All right, let's go on to losses. Start with you, Pierre. What is a loss or two that you had either in terms of player or strategy for this year?
Yeah, I think something that I actually intended to do, just haven't executed quite as much because sometimes life is getting in the way of my fantasy strategy, but it's just being more active on the trade market and kind of like I mentioned earlier, taking advantage of those sell windows. When you see a guy peaking, a guy who's, having a really hot 2-3 weeks and it's early in the season, and, maybe the jury's still out on him, but a lot of people are either willing to buy in or, they get carried away or maybe they're disgruntled with somebody they got. They need to fill a need on their roster, whatever. Just taking advantage of that. And so some of the players I mentioned, like a James Outman, seeing that this was a time to sell him and maybe not just executing on that when I could have been capitalizing on those trade windows. So, it's hard because I spend the time making the videos and giving the advice and telling people this is who you should buy and this is who you should sell. And then I'm not always doing it myself, but not out of a lack of belief or anything like that. It's just kind of a time management thing. Probably once again in way too many leagues, but that's okay.
Yeah. I'll throw out something that for me, I said before the season that I'm going to try to stream a little bit more on the hitting side, especially in the NFBC where you have 2 times a week replacements for the hitters, and utilize just more volume and really take who's playing 4 games, who's playing at Colorado, and I just have not done that. And, time gets in the way, life gets in the way, and the way that I drafted is the way I always drafted for value, and then you're like, wait, should I want to keep this guy, and just a reluctance to drop some guys. And let me ask you this question, and I'm saying this as I listen to Jeff Zimmerman talk on the Baseball HQ podcast. Very good point he makes. But if I said, who would you rather have for the season? Mike Trout, who gets 300 at bats only, or if I guarantee you Austin Hayes having 600 at bats, which would you take?
Well, it's easily going to be Trout because you can replace those other 300 at bats, assuming you know when he's injured.
So now let me amend the question. Assuming that you cannot replace Mike Trout for the other,
okay.
Like you're locked in for the season, you get 300 Mike Trout or you get 600 at bats of Austin Hayes. What'd you take?
I'll still take Trout.
I would take Austin Hayes because if you accumulate 600 at bats, you accumulate more counting stats in general.
Yeah.
And for the short term, I think Mike Trout will be great because Mike Trout is Mike Trout, and he'll get you those stats. But if he's not playing and he's a zero or close to a zero for half the season, I'd rather have a $20 Mike Trout for a half. I don't think I'd rather have. I don't think I'd rather have a $20 Mike Trout value for half a season, and I'd rather have the Austin Hayes who'll give me
Yeah.
$18 or $19, but I don't have to have worry about replacing him because he's got the consistency.
Yeah, I'm talking about a type of format where you can't replace anybody, and I'm telling you that I'm guaranteeing exactly 300 at bats for Trout and exactly 600 for Hayes. Or how about Seiya Suzuki for 600 at bats, or Mike Trout for 400 or so. You might say, listen, say Suzuki, that's 200 extra at bats. Of course I'll take that. Well, now you talk about if you're playing Monday to Thursday in the first half of an NFBC week, if Mike Trout has 2 games and Austin Hayes has 4, who are you going to play? Like, who are you going to play?
Yeah. When you put it that way, then it makes it a little more clear. Like,
Right.
2 games is not going to do it for you.
Right, but like when you're projecting, right, it's playing time times rates. Austin Hayes getting 4 games versus Mike Trout getting 2. You do that. Now, on your roster, you would not be replacing Mike Trout with an Austin Hayes. That's not the either or. But what you are doing is you're getting a fringe waiver guy to replace another fringe waiver guy on your team. So obviously, if you're getting 50% more at bats or 100% more at bats or whatever it is based on getting 4 games versus 3 or 4 games versus 2 or whatever the differential is, 100% volume. So it is so important to do that, and that's just a loss that I personally had because I have not been so in tune to say, wait a minute, who are my pickups? Forget the long-term guys. What about just winning this week? Just using 2 slots just to get that. So that's 1 point for me.
Well, on the pitching end, you can say the same thing about drafting a Jacob deGrom. You know he's going to get hurt. He always gets hurt, but when he pitches, he'll lead the league in strikeouts for those 2, 3, 4 week stretches when he pitches healthy. So you can talk about the same thing, which brings me to my loss, which I took some pitchers, and I said I wasn't going to do it, and I did it anyway. I took some pitchers who started off the year either a little bit dinged up or they weren't sure whether they're going to start the season, and I fell behind in a lot of counting stats, and I can't make it up now. And I said I wasn't going to do it, but I did it anyway because, unfortunately, those guys are actually homers. I'm from New York. I had shares of Verlander. I had shares of Scherzer, Severino, thinking he'd come back and just turn it back on. And those guys who started off injured or slightly injured, and you knew you weren't going to get 100% out of them to start with, those guys have put me in a deeper hole. And there's some leagues when I'm so far behind in strikeouts that there's no chance of me catching up, and I have to change my strategy for the rest of the season because of it. So I said I was going to stay away from preseason, but old habits are hard to break sometimes, and he did it anyway.
Any other loss for you, Pierre?
Yeah, looking at a individual player level, and in the bigger picture, is just maybe holding on a little too long to some of my favorite preseason sleepers that just did not pan out. So, a guy I was convinced Oscar Gonzalez in Cleveland was just going to be a breakout star, and now he's in the minors. I think he's still there. Just keeping him on in the lineup and just waiting because it's early. He'll break out of it. Just a cold start. And then keep him on the bench and then just clogging up that roster spot, especially in an NFBC league where you really can't afford to just wait. So like I said, waiting a little too long, and I still don't know what happened with him particularly, but yeah, sometimes the guys we're just absolutely convinced are going to be studs just aren't.
Like Jordan Walker, who was sent down and was called up today again. I'm checking all my leagues because he was just called up earlier today, and I'm looking at him like everyone held on to them. So Jordan Walker was taking up a roster spot for the past 2 months, and you've gotten maybe a half a month of playing time out of him, and he's taking up a roster spot, and now you have him. You know how he's going to be now. He was hitting in the minors, yes, but he was hitting in spring training also, so you never know.
So the NFBC is holding some second chance leagues this week. Hey, if you don't like how your league went or whatever, here's another league. Obviously, they're also trying to make a little bit of money as well, as they do, but I think it's a cool idea. How would you draft differently? We talked about our wins and losses so far. What strategy would change for you if you were drafting now? Now, it might be that, listen, we know that homers go up in June, July, August because of the summer, so that would devalue homers a little bit, meaning it's a little bit more findable on the waiver wire, so maybe that's 1 point. But, maybe some of the things we talked about earlier. Pierre, what's something that you would change in terms of second chance strategy if you were drafting from scratch today?
Well, this goes back to Ruven's point earlier. I mean, he nailed it with the pitching is that you're taking some risks with starting pitching early. But now that we know who is looking like an ace and who just isn't, really prioritizing the guys that, we feel are definitely going to be solid the rest of the year. I mean, a guy like a Spencer Strider, I almost think he's got to be a first round pick, doesn't he? At this point in a second chance league, those guys who you feel like can carry you and then you can make up for later in your rotation. But really nailing down the guys who are aces, or at least pitching like aces early on, their ADP is going to go way up just because they're now so much more valuable compared to their peers. And then devaluing some of those stats like stolen bases, like home runs, that you now feel a little bit more comfortable knowing who can help you there and who can't.
By the way, Spencer Strider is the number 3 player off the board currently. There's only been 4 drafts so far. Second chance, obviously first pitcher. So yeah, there you go, right there. Do you worry though that he's going to be shut down at some point, or at least limited, or I'd say maybe they'll skip some starts so that they don't overtax him as he gets to the playoffs? That's my only worry really about Strider.
I wouldn't think so. He's pretty young, and this is a team that's pushing for it all. So I don't think so. If this was his first go in the bigs, that might be different. But no, and even so, if he skips a start or two, is that really going to push him down? I mean, I know this is like the argument we just had, right, as far as counting stats. But again, which other starting pitcher are you going to put over him? I don't see anybody who's really even that close. And then let me also throw out a guy like Kevin Gausman, who I didn't understand. I always keep saying this in the offseason. Why is he being deprioritized in drafts? This is a guy who's just getting better with age, and I said he should be a Cy Young candidate, and he is. He's pitching like an ace. So just guys like that, just feeling a lot more solid about.
Gausman taken in the first round now. He's the 4th overall starting pitcher other than Shohei Ohtani, who's obviously both. I mean, the other thing, one strategy thing that I would change is you just got to be careful. And you might be right about Strider, but a guy like Tanner Bivey or, some of these rookies, they might get capped. So I don't know that I would prioritize some of those. They could get shut down, especially if they're on bad teams or teams not in the playoffs. So I just look for that, a little bit. Ruvain, anything to add?
Yeah, I think this is the one type of draft that you can use recency bias to your advantage. I think this is, if you're drafting a team now, you have to look at it and say, you know what? I had the preseason stuff. All that stuff can go out the window, especially if you're ranking. In preseason in February, I think Carlos Rodon was the number 1 or 2 pitcher. All that stuff I think can go out the window. I think you have to treat a second chance draft as if it's the fab waiver wire and just go it like that. You can use the last 3 weeks and see how they're doing. You want to get a sleeper? Look at Max Scherzer in his last couple starts. His ERA is under 1.5, and he looks like the Max Scherzer of old. You may be able to get a steal from him later on in the draft because people are thinking, oh, look at that high ERA. Look what he's done. He's been hurt. He's caught cheating, or whatever you want to talk about. There are hidden gems in there now that have good track records, and you just have to know when to wait and get them because some players will still turn it around. They have a track record and they will turn around. But some players, you just don't know where you're going to get.
Yeah, that's a great point. You don't want to put that much attention into year-to-date stats because remember, projected rest of season is going to be better than year-to-date. Obviously, it's more important to look at this year's stats than last year's stats. But remember, it's only one component. There is luck, so that's true. I'll throw 2 more things out there. Strategies, both directed at pitchers. Number 1, closers. I think that the paying for closers still has to be high, especially more now because I think that roles are even more settled now than they were preseason. Preseason, you didn't know this team going to go with who. Is it Daniel Bard? Is it Pierre Johnson? And that's a crappy situation. But you're more sure of players right now. And closers, there's a lot of situations that are split. The teams that use primarily one closer, so much more valuable. So that's one thing to consider. And also, take a look at starters who have a very high innings pitched per start. As you go forward, wins are very fickle, but the longer you're in a game, the bigger chance that you have to win. And innings pitched, innings pitched, innings pitched. If you're throwing quality starts, if you're lasting into the seventh inning, you have a much bigger chance, even if you're on a crappier team. And by the way, I would also shoot for good teams. You'll get a lot more wins on good teams. So those are two things to look for: good teams and innings pitched to games started. Even if they're not the greatest pitcher ERA wise, the boost in wins. And remember, the counting stats of wins, it's not, it's a lower scale than a lot of other things. Like strikeouts are going to be in the hundreds, thousands. By the end of the year, you're going to get like 100 wins for the year in terms of your team. And if you're doing second chance leagues, we're talking like 60, 70. So every win counts. You want to pounce on every chance that you can. Anything to add, Pierre?
Well, one thing I'd like to think might be a smart strategy and take advantage of some recency bias is to maybe take advantage of depressed ADPs for injured players coming back. But I'm curious and I ask for both of you, or Ariel being one who manages risk, and then Ruven, of course, with your injury background, knowing like how comfortable do you feel taking on like a DeGrom, or maybe feeling Max Fried or a Tristan McKenzie. Pitchers are you're not worried at all about how they perform when healthy. Like these are guys who are absolutely going to be in your rotation. But is the risk outweighing the reward for you?
I think it depends on your team construct. If you balance your risk out with the proper amount of compilers, then you shouldn't really have that much of an issue having that risk. So if you drafted DeGrom, then you should also have an innings leader. Try to draft like a Marcus Stroman, who's giving you a lot of innings. He may not be an ace like he is the rest of the season, but you know what you're going to get out of him also. So if you even out the risk, unless you want to take. Listen, there's some people who in the second chance, they want to take all the risks in the world. They think DeGrom's going to come back great. Take Max Fried, take all these guys who are going to come back eventually, and just hope for it because, sometimes they pan out. I mean, sometimes people win the lottery too.
Yeah, I mean, in general, you want to risk adjust prices. You got to bake the fact that DeGrom could be out for longer into his price. And if you're not subtracting money that you're spending in draft capital, then you're not doing it right. And the later in the season you are, like a second chance league is only 4 months instead of 6 months, there's a bigger chance that the loss of him is more binary, right? It's, what percentage of the season he's out, if he's out, becomes higher. So you're getting a risk that's more binary in nature. He's back or he's not back versus, he's going to miss a percentage of time, right? So because of that, you need to discount even more. That standard deviation of risk is greater. I think you got to be more risk averse on that. So, it's all a factor. Obviously, I'm going to pick DeGrom over some scrubby pitcher on the waiver wire, but he's going to be lower than what I would perceive as the market. Guy like Max Fried, I don't know. He's had some issues this year. Again, it's another risk target. Pushes him down. You push him down for the innings projection, and you got to discount on top of that for the risk of being binary and not coming back when he's supposed to. So,
well, what do you do with a reliever situation? Let's say or you think a guy's going to be traded because they're on a bad team. Let's say a guy who's got a lot of saves who may be traded, like a Kyle Finnegan, or everyone who wants to trade for Alexis Diaz. Would you rank them higher than other relievers? Let's say you had a choice of Alexis Diaz at this point, a David Bednar, or an Evan Phillips. Which reliever are you going to get for a closer to get saves?
Oh, well, David Bednar is not going to be traded.
Okay, if he's not going to be traded, then he'll probably be number one. So let's go between Kyle Finnegan and Evan Phillips, rest of season. Who are you drafting to get the most saves?
Oh, I mean, Finnegan will be traded. Finnegan will be traded, much higher probability than Phillips, although Phillips may not be the closer anyways. So I guess I would, come up with some probability of Finnegan traded. Let's say it's 70%. 50%, whatever it is, and say, listen, maybe Phillips is good for 5 saves going forward, 7 saves. Finnegan is good for saves up until the trade deadline, and do the math, and that's what it is.
Same question to you, Pierre. What about a player like would you draft either Carlos Estevez first, or would you draft an Alex Lang? Carlos Estevez will probably be traded. Alex Lang maybe not because he's younger. So two players like that? What do you think about that?
I'm going to take the guy who I think is less likely to just wreck my ratios. And so in this case, I will go Phillips over um, uh,
Finnegan.
was his first for Finnegan, and I would definitely go with Lang, who is actually pitching really well lately. Um, yeah, so saves are so hard, and of course the trade deadline never breaks down exactly the way we expect it to. So in that case, yeah, I'll probably lean towards the guy who I feel is just more steady and not going to kill me in the other categories.
All right, let's do some waiver wire picks. Who's somebody that you'd like to pick up off the waiver wire, short term or long term, but pick him up this week? Pierre, go first.
Well, I can't quit Royce Lewis, and now he's back, so I'm all in on him. I mean, obviously, former top pick, just can't stay healthy. We know the risk, but we also know potential reward, power, and speed, and now he's just like every other twin who is injured. He's got a chance to start now, so he's going to be, I think, holding down third base, it looks like these days. But look, this guy, I think, as long as he's got that shot, he can actually stay on the field. Absolutely worth the upside. So I'm going to probably make him my top priority wherever he's available.
Ruvain?
I got a couple of guys. First guy I'm going to mention is a guy filling in now for someone who's injured. Alec Boehm is out, and Cody Clemens is available. Yes, Cody Clemens. He's batting .357 over the last week. He's batting .268 over the last year with 4 home runs. He's only owned in 2% of CBS leagues, which means he's eligible. He's out there. Most NFBCs he may be available also. He's eligible at first and third. So when your first base and your third baseman go down, they have injury. He's a guy you can plug in for the short term. I'm not saying for the long term, but for the short term, he's a guy you can definitely use to plug in holes. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Gary Sanchez. He's in San Diego. He already has 2 home runs. If you have a 2-catcher league, there's no reason why you shouldn't be taking a waiver wire on him. There's no reason whatsoever. He's only owned in 3% of CBS leagues. So he's also widely available, and now he's playing out in San Diego. He's not really having any competition out there. Austin Nola, I've heard rumors of them sending him down for a bit. So Gary Sanchez may actually have a spot there in San Diego, and that's a pretty decent lineup, and he has 2 home runs already in the first couple of games he's playing. I also want to mention a reliever. I want to mention Jalen Beeks of Tampa Bay. He's a reliever / opener. I say that because he got a win in the past 3 outings. He has a win and he has a save, and he's been an opener for one of those games. With Pete Fairbanks being out, Jalen Beeks has been one of the first people called upon to close. Yes, Jason Adam will get the majority of the saves opportunities, but remember, it's a Tampa Bay bullpen. Everyone gets a save opportunity out there, and he's got 27 strikeouts in 28 innings. So he's a good guy to have on your roster. His ratios aren't going to kill you per se because he's been doing better. Don't look at the numbers right now. He's been doing better recently, and I think he's a guy who may get you some vultures, some saves.
Yeah. By the way, Gary Sanchez was a designated hitter today in San Diego. So
So he's going to get even more bats if they do that.
Why did the Mets give him up again? Too many catchers on the Mets. And Francisco Alvarez is looking great, by the way. So good for the Mets. I'll throw in Jose Siri. I have no idea why Jose Siri is still available in 75% of CBS leagues. Well, I have some idea. He plays on the Rays, so he platoons a little bit. But, he does play defense pretty well, so they're going to keep him on. He has 10 homers and 5 stolen bases. That's like a 25-15 pace. Very valuable. And he missed some time, so it's actually even more. It's even a bigger pace for that. And we've mentioned Luke Raleigh. I mean, he has 10 homers and 7 stolen bases. It's a 25-20 pace. These guys on the Rays are valuable. I know people don't want to roster these guys. Well, they're gonna platoon. But when you're getting that kind of production, even less amounts, it's still worth it to have on the roster. I'll mention 2 more. Shallow league. Spencer Steer, really hot right now. Batting .289 on the year. If he's available in your 10-team league, he might in a 10-team league. He may or may not be available, but in a deeper league, pick him up. You might as well. And Willie Castro, I picked him up in a couple spots last week. He's batting .274 in the year with 4 homers and 10 stolen bases. In the month of May, 9 stolen bases. He has 9 stolen bases this month, batting .319. And he's filling in and he's playing. the Twins are a good team. I would pick up Willie Castro where you can. Anybody else, Pierre?
Well, I mean, also probably more shallow leagues, but a lot of places Jake McCarthy was dropped. People probably noticed he's back. Just got that average up to 200. But the good news is he has 8 steals already in just 28 games. He was injured and then sent down for a while, but he's back. So if you need speed, that might be good. And I mean, I think at this point everyone has probably picked up Bobby Miller. I'm guessing.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't mention him as a loss this year, but yeah, Jake McCarthy was a loss. But maybe he'll turn it around.
And by the way, Aro, you mentioned the two Rays. There was a sports radio personality here in New York who insinuated that the Rays were cheating because all these guys he's never heard of, or the guys who haven't had any, idea of doing any history of doing well, are suddenly doing well. So he insinuated that they were cheating, and there was a whole radio fight between people down in Tampa saying that no, what are you talking about? If you look into the numbers, all the players who are overachieving on the Rays right now, their launch angle has increased anywhere between 5 to 15 degrees. So instead of hitting the ball on the ground, they're hitting the ball in the air. They're hitting more line drives. So these players that are doing well. Yandy Diaz, Luke Rowley, Taylor Walls. These guys are not flukes. They changed something in the offseason, and they could be long-term keep guys. These are not just for the short term. These guys you can keep for the rest of the year and beyond.
Yeah, agree. No, the Rays are doing something, and the Rays know what they're doing. There you go. Let's do pitcher preview. Pierre, who's a pitcher that you might want to pick up for this coming week or in the next 2 weeks? Somebody to pick up short term.
All right, so a guy who I think is going to be making 2 starts and might be a nice sneaky waiver wire pickup coming here is in Detroit, Alex Faedo, if I'm saying that right. He's somebody, he doesn't really stand out, do anything special, but when he is healthy and when he's on, he can command the strike zone. He's had some good outings, doesn't walk batters. That's the thing I like the best, at least so far. Has been pretty successful with that. Got a very low 2% walk rate. So you look at the season-long numbers and especially the ERA, not great, but he is pitching pretty well, and I think he could be somebody who can hold down your rotation if you're looking for a 2-star pitcher this week.
Yeah, he's not holding runners on. He has a very low strand rate, but his BABIP is low. So it's interesting. He's being unlucky on the ERA, but lucky on the WHIP. But yes, that K minus BB is 23% on the year, with a swing strike rate of almost 12% to support it. So yeah, I like that as well. What about you, Ruvain?
I have 2 starting pitchers. If you care to stomach them, when I say their names, you'll probably know why. First one is Johan Oviedo. He's owned in 43% of CBS leagues, but I like his 2 starts. In his last 3 starts, he's 1-1 with a 2.81 ERA, and he's got 17 strikeouts in 16 innings. But his 2 starts are versus Oakland and versus the Mets, both at home. Now, the reason why I love the Oakland start, I mean, everyone who plays against Oakland should be picked up automatically. But playing against the Mets don't do well against medium to poor teams. They seem to be doing better against the better teams, which doesn't make any sense. So he's a guy you may actually get 2 wins out of. Another guy that I never thought I would mention and was on nobody's radar, Julio Teheran. If you really want to dig deep, he's only owned in 5% of CBS leagues. He's at Cincinnati, and also second start against Oakland. He's looked decent, even though the peripheral numbers don't really support it that well. He's pitched so far only 11 innings, but he's pitched decently. He's only had 5 strikeouts. He has a 1-1 record. He's a guy who you may be able to sneak 1 win out of because he's playing Oakland.
I'll mention 3 guys. First, on the Mets, Carlos Carrasco. He looks like he's back. Good outing the other day. His ERA is 3.57 since he came back from injury. His velocity has ticked up 2 ticks. Yes, I think he could be trusted now. He's got 2 start this week. 1 tough, 1 not as tough at Atlanta, at Pittsburgh, and then he's versus St. Louis the following week. But I think for 12 and deeper, definitely worth a look. How about Ben Lively? He's pitching at St. Louis, then he's pitching at Kansas City. Guy on the Reds. Luck metrics show he's very lucky, but he does have an excellent 22% K minus BB. He's very hot right now. Looks like he picked up some tricks from being over at the KBO in prior years. He's only 25% owned, so he's interesting. And how about, I thought the Marlins guy would say this, Braxton Garrett to start versus Kansas City, and then he's at Chicago White Sox, and next week he's at Washington. Pretty good schedule coming up. K-minus BB of 19. He's only 35% owned. His Sierra this year, 3.6, which is better than the 4.22 ERA and 1.31 WHIP. So he's actually been unlucky a little bit. I like the Marlins for pitchers in general, and he's looks promising. So take a look at Braxton Garrett to start week. I like it, especially in points leagues for that guy. Anybody else, Pierre?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did think about Garrett. He got a nice schedule. He's been a little uneven, but remember, this is one of their higher end prospects coming into last year. So
Yes.
definitely worth looking into. He's not getting the fanfare of like a Yuri Perez, but obvious reason he's not that type of pitcher. But he's starting to get a little bit better grip of the strike zone too. And I'll go with a guy a little deeper for my last one here. Tommy Henry in Arizona looked great in his last outing. With a shutout over 7 innings, but gets Washington in his first start. And it looks like his next start is at Detroit against the first pitcher I mentioned, which is Alex Fido. So definitely nothing scary there on the schedule. I don't know how much I'm putting into his last start. I'm not saying that this is someone who's going to be necessarily a breakout candidate for the rest of the season, but he's settling down. His first couple starts were bad, but he's getting it together. So somebody in deeper leagues you might want to look at.
Diamondbacks are doing well this year. They're 33-23 as of the other day. ATC projects that they have over a 45% chance to make the playoffs. They're only a half a game out right now. I would take the over on the 45%. I think I would if you gave me 1-to-1 odds there, I would definitely take that bet for the Diamondbacks making the playoffs. So there you go. We got one mailbag question from Murad. Very general question, so we'll just throw out a couple of names. Hey, Ariel, any buy low and sell high hitters and pitchers for redraft? That's thank you for the question, Murad. That is a pretty general question of who are some who are some buy low and sell high guys that you have for redraft. That is, Pierre. Anybody come to mind? Do you want to buy low on or sell high?
Well, I'm going to sell high on one of my Marlins, and that's Jorge Soler. Everyone had pretty much given up on him, including me, after last year. He just kind of had a miserable time, like a lot of the free agents that came over. And now you look at his StatCast, one of the league leaders in barrels and slugging and everything. And, he's looking like he's reviving his glory days. But as I talked about earlier, what goes up must come down. Is he going to sustain this level all season long? I don't think so. At some point, he is going to cool off because this is a guy who is also prone to striking out a lot. And he is actually still striking out at a decent clip this year, 26%. But anyways, I think at this point, since he is getting up there in terms of home runs with the league leaders, I think that is going to taper off, but also you're going to be left a little bit wanting in like the runs and RBIs because he's on the Marlins. So I think this is a good time to capitalize on his trade value and to sell him away. And then as far as buying, go the opposite. Someone who really hasn't shown a lot of power at all is MJ Melendez in Kansas City. Now, he's somebody who we know can hit the ball hard. He is hitting the ball hard. He's just hitting it right at some fielders, and he's only got 5 home runs. So the average is no good. The strikeout rate is terrible. But I feel like, this is somebody who isn't really, he shouldn't be a player who's selling out for power, right? He doesn't need to do that. And I feel like he's kind of pressing a little bit at the plate. This whole Kansas City offense, very young. It's coming together, right? The first couple of weeks, this whole Kansas City offense struggled, like all of them. But it's coming together. So I think he's worth taking a shot on, especially because, of course, catcher eligibility, that's very important. So I do think that this might be a good time to throw out an offer for him because his value is pretty much as low as you can get.
Ruvain, couple guys.
Well, first of all, 2 guys I want to mention for buy low. I mentioned about Max Scherzer already. That year, if you're just looking at it on a whole, it doesn't look that great, but he's really, really turned it around. And he had a couple of hiccups here and there, but he's been doing much, much better recently. He's on a good team. He's gotten to a rhythm. Remember, he had the suspension where he had a problem. He missed a couple starts because of a slight injury as well. So he wasn't 100% Max Scherzer. If you can get him for anything below what you would draft him for, now would be the time, because we didn't expect him to make 35 starts. He wasn't going to start 35 times, but now he's on a roll. It's going to get warmer. He's a, as they call, quote unquote, bulldog. He's going to give you a lot of innings as well. So if you can buy anything on a discount for him, I think go for him. Another guy who'd buy low on is Andres Jimenez. He's turned it around. His average right now is in the 240s, but recently he's been batting 280, close to 290 for the past couple of weeks. He is slowly turning it around. He's figuring it out again. You're not going to get the all-star value you got last year, because I think people may have overpaid for him, but you're still going to get a good middle infielder who will get you some stolen bases, get you some runs. The Cleveland team can turn it on. They can turn on the runs very quickly. They're not a power hitting team, but they go from first to third. They're that type of baseball team. Guys to sell high on. I'm a little nervous about any guy who has an injury history, so I'm a little nervous about a guy like Christian Yelich. If you want to sell high on him, he's got 7 homers and 12 stolen bases. Is he going to continue that pace toward the rest of the year? A guy who's already getting on the old, he's on the wrong side of 30. He has a history of a back issue. He's a guy I definitely try to sell high on. And same guy you mentioned about Jorge Soler. I'm not completely sold on him yet, because he is a very streaky player, and I'm a little nervous about him as well.
So I'll give you a couple guys and a couple of strategy points with them. You mentioned like an older guy who might get injured. Well, there's one guy that comes to mind that has been performing well, is almost guaranteed to come out for either injury or taking him out anyways, and that's Clayton Kershaw. If you've got Clayton Kershaw in any redraft league, trade him away now. You've gotten your value out of him. You've used it. You've gotten it. Trade it for a different commodity, whatever it is. He's not getting better than this, and I guarantee you, he will miss a bunch of starts for some injury, whether there's an injury or not. The Dodgers are going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to win the division. Management knows it. They know what Kershaw is. They know. I don't have to convince you any further. Kershaw is a guy. Even a guy like Luis Robert, I think he's going to get injured. Just trade him. How about a guy like Isaac Paredes, doing well, and he has multiplayer eligibility. If you're in a league where multiplayer eligibility matters, and he's doing well, his trade value will never be as high as now. And that's the time to unload. Or how about a guy like Patrick Wisdom? He's somebody who, if you look at year-to-date stats, they look awesome, even though they're probably not going to be as much going forward. So if you have, sometimes when you're making a trade offer and it comes up on your screen as, oh, here's what they've done to date, and they're the X number player, that's definitely a type of player to trade. So look and see what player in your league will like to trade for that kind of player. I'm sure there's other examples, and there you go. In terms of buy low, again, it really all depends on what your situation is. Like Lance Lynn, first of all, his price has got to be dirt cheap after he bombed the other day. I'd buy especially not if you're on top, but if you're needing some oomph and you're needing catch up, what do you have to lose? It's a cheap price. There's upside. I also like a guy like how about Michael Kopech? Same thing. He's risky, but on the upside that he's caught it, that's a guy. Or how about Aaron Nola? I know Aaron Nola's better than this. He's done this a lot before. He's had good starts, good places. They've got a good lineup behind him. I think you can also gain, similar to what Scherzer, Ruven was saying, buy Scherzer at a discount. I think you can buy Aaron Nola at a discount as well. Injury report, Ruven, go for it.
All right, we'll start with, I mentioned this guy already earlier, and that's Cedric Mullins. He was placed in the IL with a right groin strain. It's a grade 2 strain. The team says they hope Mullins will be out for weeks rather than months. Usually a grade 2 strain means 6 to 8 weeks. That's typical. So, scour the waiver wire, and the guy who's replacing him right now is Aaron Hicks. I don't know if I pick him up. But there are other guys out there that you may want to pick up. Another outfielder's on the IL, Jesse Winker, is placed on with a cervical strain. It started off as neck discomfort, but they found a strain. There's no timetable for his return yet. But two guys who are on the mend, Luis Urias and Adam Duvall. Luis Urias has been out since April 1st with a hamstring strain. He could return this coming week. And Adam Duvall, he's available on the waiver wire. I know a lot of people picked him up already in the last couple of weeks. I saw him on a lot of people's waiver wires, but he could be activated on June 9th. He was on the 60-day IL. That's as soon as he can come back from that wrist fracture. So he's a guy, if he's available, try to get him now. Chris Bryant, he's another guy that always seems to get injured. He has a left heel bruise. It's on the same foot that he had the plantar fasciitis from last year. How will that play into it? I don't know, because there's a very good chance that it can aggravate the plantar fascia, especially if the heel, because the plantar fascia is actually attached to the heel, so there's a chance that it could aggravate it. So that's something to watch for. And I did mention also Alec Boehm. He has a left hamstring strain. They're hoping they said it's very mild, but there are a couple of guys who are on the waiver wire that you may want to pick up. I mentioned Cody Clemens was filling in for him, and Mundo Sosa is available a lot of places. Josh Harrison can see more time as well, and also someone who's not on the IL yet, but will probably land on the IL after this podcast hits, and that's Justin Steele. Justin Steele has a left forearm issue. He's supposed to get an MRI today. We haven't heard anything yet, but the Cubs did not sound too optimistic about it, so you may hear something over the weekend about it. Hayden Wisniewski may actually fill in his spot for a while, so he's probably available in a lot of spots. He's a guy you can pick up.
All right, well, lots and lots of information and things to talk about this week. Thank you so much, Pierre, for coming on. It is always a pleasure having you. Always great conversation. And definitely check out Pierre's channel on YouTube, Fantasy Endgame. Really great stuff. Videos are excellent. Please check that out. Pierre, anything else that I'm missing from you?
No, that's it. And always great to talk with you guys. I mean, I feel like we cover so much and go so in depth for, just an hour, and the time flies. So, and I always learn something too. That's what I love. You always get great perspective on things when we have our conversations. So, and I would say that last injury report makes me sad, because that was one player I forgot to mention. My wins, I feel Justin Steele was a win because I was all over him in the preseason. And of course, now there goes that. So I think my TGFBI team is kind of feeling like that Titanic right now, but hopefully I'll hold on.
I was also high on him. I wanted him. I ended up not getting him because it was a little too overvalued for me. But he was a guy that I had last year, and he just carried me with strikeouts last year. So I really liked him coming into this year.
Would you consider Jeffrey Springs and Drew Rasmussen to be wins? Because I had pretty much either one on every single roster. Like, I was playing in that price range. You have Pablo Lopez, Rasmussen, Springs, all about the same price. Do you consider those two wins, or do you consider those two losses?
Well, it depends where you drafted them, but based on where you probably got them, I'd say it's a good win for 2 weeks. I think you take your wins where you can get them.
Obviously, it's the type of player. I was right on the player, and so the process was correct. But you had the injury, and maybe we should have known that. Oh, now they're doing maybe they have a different windup, different mechanic. Maybe I should have known that. But from my perspective, if we think that it's luck, I think I consider it a win because it was the right player and they got injured. A lot of people get injured, I don't know, but you can consider it a loss because obviously by the end of the year, the value will be far in the negative.
We take the wins where we can get them. The process was right. I would count that as a win.
All right. Thumbs up there. All right, Ruvain, what about you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out all these injury updates and much more. You can also catch my weekly article on Roto-Bowler. It comes out every weekend to help you with the injury updates with all the players I mentioned, as well as others, next man up, and everything like that.
All right, I'm Ariel Cohen. I wrote for Fangraphs for Roto-Bowler, and we're on the Beat the Shift podcast, and my Twitter handle is ATCNY. All right, great stuff today. We'll be back next week. Once again, thank you so much, Pierre Camus, for coming on the show. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.